This episode of AU Manufacturing Conversations is a session recorded at our recent Spotlight on Scaling Up seminar held on June 25 at University of Technology, Sydney. A big thanks to everybody who bought a ticket, everybody who presented, and to the sponsors who made it all possible. BDO in Australia, the Australian Business Growth Fund, and the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre.
Good morning, everyone. My name's David Martin. I work for Australian Industry Group, and I will be helping to facilitate the last session today. We aim to get back on time, so this is going to be snappy and to the point, and we're also very keen for the audience to actually ask some questions of the participants today. Up on stage, we have some people that are deeply wise, and when I say wise, there's that old joke about the difference between intelligence and wisdom, being intelligence tells you that it's raining at 100 millimetres an hour, wisdom tells you to pack an umbrella. So everyone who is here today is interested in scaling and bringing their organisations to that next step. So we certainly do have a few questions to discuss, but we're also keen for participants into the audience to actually ask those questions that might actually help move your business forward. So just very quickly, we're going to go through each of our backgrounds. We're going to provide a 30-second overview of who we are, and then we'll get stuck into the questions. So my name is David Martin. I'm the Director of Emerging Industries and Innovation at Australian Industry Group. For those who haven't heard of us, we've been around for 152 years, and we represent the interests of up to 60,000 members nationally. We do everything from defence, workplace relations, or how people might actually increase the level of technology in their businesses. I led our most recent response to the strategic examination of R&D, and wear many other hats from defence networks to a range of other things.
Yeah, good morning. Martin Whipple, Group CEO of ANCA. We build precision grinding machines, CNC grinding machines, since 1974, based in Melbourne. Some of you might be familiar with us. We're a little bit of an Australian outlier because we're an advanced manufacturer. Fun fact, you're all customers of mine indirectly because our machines are used to make tools, to make iPhones, laptops, glasses, frames for glasses, automatic watches, dental tools, hips, if you have hip replacements or knee replacements. Thank you very much for your business. And so we're pretty much in everything and anything that is made out of hard stuff.
Hello, everyone. My name's John Bulman. I'm the Director of Manufacturing at Finisar. But previously, Finisar is one of three companies in Australia which I've joined when they're a startup, and I've taken the manufacturing from basically from scratch to volume. So while at Finisar, we're an example, I think, of a company which has taken that journey, and since starting, we've exported about $2.7 billion worth of product from our facility here in Sydney. And we've heard a lot of speakers this morning talking about their approach to the world export market. All of our products, it's a 100% export business, and we started with that in mind. There is no local customer for our products. And what we actually make are the optical switches that separate out channels of data that are used in optical communication systems, fiber optic networks around the world. And we sell those products to the companies that build those systems and deploy them globally. And so, a bit like we're hearing there, if you've used your phone, your computers, internet banking, cloud computing, that data is going over fiber optic networks, and about half the world's internet traffic is travelling over products that are made here in Sydney or ones based on that technology.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for staying, by the way. So my name's Simon Crane. I'm a bit of an outlier here because I'm a business owner, and I come from 170 years of manufacturing with my family, and sadly, I am the last. My children look at my life and say, well, that's obviously for losers or maniacs. And they're probably right. Mine's a slightly different story. My company is smaller than many of the companies here today. But although I'm an engineer by profession and by inclination, I've had to make myself be a businessman because I've had to make money from day one. So if we have time, I can tell you a few stories about how one does that. I've been listening to people who've been losing money for a while, and it's a different world to mine. I can't afford to lose money. And if I want to build my business, every single thing has to be done with retained profits. The Lovells Group doesn't owe any money to anybody, which is a really nice situation to be in, but that took a long time to achieve. Anyway, we'll be turning 100 soon. Obviously, I haven't been the custodian for the entire century of operation, but a good chunk of it. And hopefully I'll get to tell you a story or two about how to make a company last 100 years. It's not that easy.
That's an excellent segue to our first question today. So quite often at these events, we'll see shiny examples of people who've done it outstandingly right with regards to it can happen here or how to scale your business. So actually our first question is, can each of you show or share a key learning or where things have gone either horribly wrong or horribly right, or just right, that you'd like to share with the audience about how to scale their businesses and what you learned? So we actually might start with you.
Well, I can certainly tell you some horribly wrong stories. One involves a government grant. So Lovells has only ever had one. To this day, I feel that it distracted me from thinking about whether this business I was going to start, or a new division of Lovells, was really a good idea. I became so fixated on getting this rotten little grant that I didn't really sit down and think, is this a long-term viable business? So I got the grant, and over the next few years that was rewarded with, for every dollar of grant, about $25 of losses. And finally I had to close the company. What had I got so horribly wrong? Well, it was my number 3 rule, and I might later on tell you about rules number 1 and 2. But number 3 rule is never have more than 10% of your business with one customer. That is asking for trouble. Well, I had 80% of this company's business with one customer, the New South Wales government. We were building the electrical systems for a very beautiful fleet of trains, which probably none of you have ever heard of, called the Oscars, which are our homegrown intercity fleet. And we took on the job of building the electrical systems for those trains. There was a change of government. A certain Gladys Berejiklian came in and cancelled that project, and we bought instead, we'd built 120 of those carriages, which are still trundling around the tracks of New South Wales, but we now have bought 800 intercity carriages from Hyundai, which some of you may have sat in, and they're great. Can't take it away from the Koreans, but that was the end of Lovells technology. But that was a great example of focusing on the grant, not on whether this is a good idea at all.
Okay, I think my story has a good side and a bad side. So I'll start with the bad side. So our products are actually sold particularly to customers. They design them into their next level systems. We're selling effectively a subsystem that goes into a larger system. But because of that, we get drawn in to their project timescales and their demands. At one point, we didn't actually have the technology and in fact, the key component that we needed to achieve what the customer wanted. But we didn't want to tell them that. And so an enormous amount of engineering and effort went into trying to meet the customer's requirement without really the right technology and materials. And the cost and the effort of doing that was just extraordinary. From that perspective, it looked like a terrible thing to do. But the objective of keeping the customer happy actually worked. They weren't aware of our poor yields and the troubles that we had. And so that customer moved on. They've got new products, new systems, and they're now a very valuable and good customer for us. So it was a period of pain, but we came out the other side.
Thank you. Martin?
Well, I guess in 50 years, we've made a lot of bad decisions and good decisions. On balance, probably more good than bad. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. I'd probably, because we're an exporter like John, we export 98% of our machines. Australia is a small market, as we all know. And to go international, I think, needs a really good, smart decision-making, because you can very quickly, easily pick the wrong country, pick the wrong industry or industries. And I would encourage everybody to do their homework, work with professionals in those countries. You know, it could be Austria, it could be somebody else, but really do your homework before you go and invest. We found success in unusual places, I'd say. You know, I pick Korea, for example, or I pick Poland, which are good markets for us. I see too often that people want to scale, go the classic route of US or UK. I think it's a cultural kind of preset in Australia. It doesn't have to be. I always joke when I watch the Qantas flight to London, which costs 3 times as much as the flight to Amsterdam, and everybody books it still, and I can't understand why. In any case, look, if you do the homework properly and you pick markets where nobody else is, and again, we've been very successful in Korea, and we were the only one building industrial capability and relationships in Korea, for example, where everybody else was traveling to the US. So key learning is do your homework, pick wisely, focus on a few countries, don't do the whole global market in one go, and you'll be fine.
Manufacturing your products here in Australia is a key part to your success with regards to your businesses and companies. Can you share why you've chosen not to take the least cost option overseas and offshore your operations?
In my case, a lot of it is the burden of a long family history of manufacturing here in Australia. So at one point, my family employed 9,000 people in manufacturing. I left the family company to do my own thing, but that company doesn't exist anymore. Now, some of those factories do still exist, but it's probably 1,000 people left out of 9,000. So I come from employing a lot of Australians. I really like it. And I'm just not interested in building factories overseas. It's that simple. It's completely irrational. It's a sentimental attachment to the Australian people, and I love giving them good jobs, especially those who actually aren't as fortunate as most of us in this room. Because if you are in manufacturing, not everybody is a rocket scientist. There are people on the factory floor who've started life in a fairly poor situation. Their education is poor. They come to Lovells often with zero prospects, and within a few years, they own a car, they have a girlfriend, and blow me down, sometimes they've got a deposit on a house. And I love that. And if I owned a factory in Vietnam, which I very easily could, I just wouldn't get the same buzz out of that. So there we go.
Thank you.
Those are great comments from Simon, and I certainly share his thoughts for the benefits of employment in Australia. We have a slightly different approach at Finisar. We're actually owned by an American company, and there's been a lot of pressure to make a lot of the manufacturing in factories that they actually own in China. And what we've found is a good balance of doing what is sensible in different locations. So we actually have a facility in South Korea that does some very high technology processes. They make specific components which go to another factory in China, which is owned by the American company. And there they're doing a sub-assembly. And then that sub-assembly comes to Australia, and we finish the product here. And within Australia, what that generates is obviously that the hands-on knowledge of the product. So that all the engineering, the R&D, and I think particularly of interest to this audience is that we develop the manufacturing machine tools, the equipment and the technology for manufacturing here. So I've got the two interests really is the local employment, but also the local growth and development of technology and in training people. And we think in our organisation here in Sydney, we've trained over 1,000 people in technology. They're not all working there now, they've moved on. But that's the sort of scale of contribution that we give to the local technical community.
Yeah, we also have a balanced approach. So we do our R&D, our research here, product development, all in Australia. Been manufacturing here for 50 years, but we also do manufacture in Thailand. And I've got several factories over there. It's not necessarily, cost was one of the factors when we decided to go to Thailand 20 years ago, but it was also very much the proximity to customers. You would appreciate the machines are quite heavy, quite difficult to maintain the service, and to have technicians and engineers in Thailand being able to service our Asian customers from there was a key factor. But all the high-tech stuff, all the research and development comes out of Bayswater near Melbourne. So balanced approach. For us, it makes sense. If I can mention, because we spoke about the government and government policy before, I do have to say the Thai government policies, approach to business, support of business is second to none. And sometimes I wish we would have a little bit more of that here. And I'm not saying government, please do give us grants, because I'm not a big fan of grants either. But let's say the openness to manufacturers, to support manufacturers in many different ways is quite outstanding. And I wish we'd see more of that here in Australia.
That is a perfect segue, I have to say, because this is relates to one of our more outrageous questions. We like to create just a little bit of controversy and debate here. In a recent article in the Australian Financial Review, John Wells noticed, if I could change one thing about the mindset of the Australian business community, it would be to drop the first three words that come out of a lot of business people's mouths, particularly when they're on a panel. The Australian government should. He said there is no help like self-help. The Magnificent Seven in America, they've done it themselves without relying on government to do the hard work for them. Obsessing about a 25 basis point rate cut is not going to change the direction of the national economy. Really, it's about leadership, entrepreneurship, risk-taking, business building, and taking a long-term view on where your business is going to be in 10 years' time that will. Do you agree?
I do agree. As I said, I've only ever had one grant. I don't ever want another one. If we're going to sink or swim, it's down to me and my amazing team at Lovells. The Americans just have this incredible advantage over us, and I always like to compare the economy of Australia with that of the great state of Texas, which is about 2/3 of the size of New South Wales. It's a big state. So its economy alone of just Texas is 1.5 times the entire Australian economy. And if you look at, say, manufacturers in Texas, are they just supplying 2/3 of Texas? No, they've got this incredible base market that we not only can we not dream about it, I can't even imagine it. So I've actually built a new factory a couple of years ago to make towing equipment. It's called Lovells Special Products, and it makes very sexy couplings for connecting your vehicle to your trailer, whether it's your caravan, your boat trailer, your horse float with your palominos on it. So it's an absolutely top-of-the-range coupling, globally patented and beautiful. So we make it in this new factory in Newcastle. We're now 4 years in. I still haven't made enough stock to build up a shipment big enough to dare to send it to the United States, because they would just laugh. I need really to assemble about $5 million worth of finished stock in a fleet of containers, and then I could send them and go on the road in the United States to sell those couplings. I just can't get there. The economies of scale, it's not one order of magnitude, it's 2 orders of magnitude difference. And that's the problem for a little guy like me who's trying to do everything on retained earnings. It just takes a long time. So, yes, it would be nice if our government somehow miraculously made our lives easy, but it ain't going to happen. And little businessmen like me will toil away our entire working lives, and you know what? It's okay. I'm not exporting $200 million worth of product a year. I never will. But other companies, perhaps with other funding mechanisms, they'll be able to do it. But counting on our government to help us, I wouldn't hold your breath.
Martin.
Well, I would disagree and say the sentence, the government should stay out of the way. Libertarian and free marketeer, I think wherever the government gets involved is trouble. So my preference would be they stay out of the way, have some long-term policies, but by and large, let business do business, let markets decide. That's where I see, we should go. I think they're getting too often involved, and I think we all know COVID hasn't helped. We had this, what I would describe a nanny state phase, where the government would tell us where we can go and where we can't go, what we can, at what time of the day, and so on and so forth. We won't get into it. But I really wish we would get back to let business be business, and we'll be fine.
Having been in several startups, I actually think the key ingredient to getting going is some passion, and passion over an idea and a team that want to drive that idea. Governments can't create that. That's actually a group of people or an individual seeding that. So I've been fortunate to be in those groups several times. I think government does have a role, though, in creating an environment or a landscape in which manufacturing can flourish. And we have to recognise that on the global scale, other governments do assist their manufacturing sectors quite a lot. And so the products that I'm currently making are made by our competitors in Asia. So I've got to think, how do we compete in that global market when our competitors are getting assistance? So I find it very hard to know what that assistance should be. I certainly think trying to pick winners never works, but trying to help the manufacturing environment in some way, which I can't actually specify, but that there is a place for that.
The one thing that the government could possibly do is work on simply creating a culture of believing we could do it, because we did do it. I'm old enough, and as a little boy wandered around these plants that my family owned, long gone, we pumped goods out to globally. Most of the Middle East is plumbed with copper tube made by my family in Penrith. That plant's not there anymore. It was the biggest copper tube plant in the Southern Hemisphere. Taiwan, it's entirely plumbed by copper tube from Australia. Thailand, for the beginning of its development, was. We did do it in the 60s and 70s. Actually, we were an industrial powerhouse. Europe was still, to a certain extent, getting back on its feet, having been bombed into submission. Japan was the same. If you wanted stuff, Australia just had to make it, and we made it. We made millions of fridges, millions of cars, millions of stoves. We poured it out. And as a little boy in the 60s, I wandered through those factories. We did it, and we could do it again. But at the moment, we don't believe we could. There's a total lack of belief that Australia could ever make stuff again.
Can I emphasise that? But even in our modern high-tech environment, I've frequently encountered people that just start with the thing that you have to make it in Asia. And I've been arguing against that from my roles in Australia for the last 25 years, that there are things that can be done and done well in Australia. And there is, as you say, just a kind of lack of belief that it can be done. And I think the only way past that is to just try and prove it.
It's not going to be easy.
Do you have anything to add, Martin, just on that bit?
Yeah, I'm wondering how the government could get that across. Not quite sure. I think manufacturing and Jens Gunnemann from the AMGC is always pointing it out in terms of complexity of our industrial landscape, that we're ranking quite low. We spoke about company-to-company cooperation, where Australia also ranks quite low in global rankings. And so I hear your comment. I'm wondering what they could do.
It's called propaganda, actually. It's been tried before in some countries quite successfully. It's going to take, I would say, a quarter of a century of propaganda to convince the Australian people we can make things. And children have to hear it from about the age of 3. And by the time they graduate with a technical degree from a university, they'll actually believe it. But I mean, I think that's pretty ideologically unsound. But
I was actually about to say we have 7 minutes left, and we've deliberately kept some time separate because we're really keen to hear from manufacturers in the audience. You have some incredibly wise people on the panel to ask questions of. So, John, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, look, I kind of feel you guys landed gentry in the manufacturing space. And, I mean, just the previous panel who were in high-tech startup world, and all of them alluded to the lack of access to finance. And I don't think that we have an inability to commercialise and build products. I think where we lack is the ability to support product. And that's usually about access to finance and timely access to finance, because it takes 12 months to raise money in this country. It takes 2 or 3 months in the US. I just think it's the amount of finance that's in the pool. I mean, the reality is that pool is quite small. And so we've got great technologies emerging in this country, and everyone's basically shown the door when they get to a certain stage of development. If you want to develop further, you're going to have to go overseas. That's just the reality. And we've got to turn that around.
Do any of you want to comment on that?
It's just not the world I'm in. Yeah, so I can't comment.
My situation is perhaps closest to that you've described. In fact, the companies which I've been involved in, the founders sold the startup to American businesses to get that financing. And so I must admit, I don't feel like landed gentry, but that's what's enabled the companies to actually grow. And then the trouble can be faced is, can you keep that technology and that activity in Australia, or would it go to whoever's now acquired the company?
Yeah, it's not the world I'm in. We have access to finance. I think you are alluding to the younger companies that are in the real early scale-up phase. I think it's just the way it is in Australia. Again, I'd love to change it. I'm not sure how. There's so many factors playing into this. But for us, we have no problem accessing finance.
Thanks.
Martin, can I ask you, I don't know who owns ANCA and where do you obtain finance?
So we're family owned. We've got two ownership families, the McCluskeys and the Bolans. It's a 50-50 split. It's been in family ownership for the last 51 years.
So they founded it?
They founded it in 74, yeah, right out of uni. And we've got banking partners mainly that provide finance if we need it, trying to avoid it as much as we can.
I'll just tell you a little ANCA story. I rang them up last month looking for a quote for a grinder to make constant velocity joints. Anybody know what they are? Couple? Well done. And what was sad was I was referred to your Singapore sales office because you apparently didn't seem to have one in Australia.
Yeah, it should be Nagoya, not Singapore.
Wherever it wasn't in Australia.
But
and it told me that ANCA don't sell many pieces of equipment in Australia, which I thought was, yeah.
Well, can I just say, Simon, we've got end of year clearance sale. 4.5 more days to close the deal. I'm happy to make an offer.
The man who rang back was fantastic. So
Okay.
well done.
So can we have another question from the audience? When you do actually, can you introduce who you are and what company you represent? So I see the gentleman with the beard in the middle.
Alex, my name. Australian Rail Technology. We're in railway business. Question to Simon. You mentioned that at the beginning that you don't have any children or grandchildren patient in your business. So what's happening? Do you have any exit strategy?
So my children, all of them worked at Lovells in various capacities in their teenage years. 2 of them are medical specialists and would rather delve around in people's abdomens or even less attractive places than work at Lovells. And the other one is a financial analyst who's actually the brains of the outfit. And he tells me, Dad, you're going to be able to sell the company and retire. Relax, because I do worry about that. But none of them really want to spend their life in Australian industry. They're not rev heads. They're not car guys. They're not technocrats. They're intellectuals. They're professionals. It's a different sort of person. They're just not going to work in a rough and tumble commercial industrial environment that is my world. We come from different worlds. I love them, but they would be no use whatsoever.
Please.
The question to everyone is there same red tapes? It is how it's affect you guys. Say we try to achieve, say, technical assurance organization. Took us almost 5 years to get in there, to get approval for transport of New South Wales. Is this something you guys face similar to?
In terms of what approvals?
Approval, I mean, like red tapes. If you face it.
Can I talk about red tape?
Any limits or whatever.
I can say.
Martin's not in a red tape kind of environment, really. He's making up an industrial product.
Not from a regulatory point of view, but if you look at our cost of doing business in Australia, if I can winch for 30 seconds, we've looked at 2015 to 2025, and without giving you percentage, but single-digit EBIT percentage more that it costs us to operate in Australia. I find that it's indirectly a red tape. All kinds of individually. I look at reporting requirements. That's gender equality reporting, for example. You look at those individually and you say, yep, okay, I understand where they're coming from, I understand what they want to achieve. But if you look at it collectively, there's just a barrage of additional policies and reporting requirements. And so it hits us in a lower single-digit percentage EBIT to operate now in Australia, same revenue as in 2015. And I find it quite alarming. So indirectly, yes, red tape in terms of cost. But I think, Simon, you had a different example, right?
My example is you can turn red tape into a product. So half of Lovells sales, or certainly 40%, is the upgrading of vehicles. So we're the largest second stage manufacturer of motor vehicles in Australia, where a new car will arrive from the Toyota Motor Company and we will adjust it to do a job that was not legally allowed to do, as usually carry more or tow more or both. So that is a big chunk of our business. So the regulations regarding that are unbelievably complex. We are the world leader in the regulation of the modification of motor vehicles, by far. No one has so many regulations about what you can do and not do to a vehicle. Well, we are the master of those regulations. In fact, we encourage the government to have more regulations because every time they add another few pages, we burn off a few more competitors because they just throw their hands up and say, we can't do this anymore. So there are businesses that actually exist on government regulation. And bizarrely, me, a kind of classic free marketeer, has ended up with 40% of my business running basically powered by government regulation.
I'm sorry, please.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to touch on quite a few things, more of a comment. I want to talk about going global, I want to talk about red tape, and I want to talk about government very quickly. So my name is Mike Yonger. I work for a biotech company called Baxis. When we talk about going global, I think we have a moral imperative to go here as well, not forget here. In the biotech space, we spend millions of dollars developing therapies, cancer therapies, devices, drugs, that we don't get to use here. We don't get to use here because everybody goes overseas. We also don't get to use them here because of the regulatory system is complete bullshit. You don't mind my language, and people die and people get hurt. When we make products here, we sell them overseas, but we don't sell them here because of the red tape and because there is no culture in this country to adopt our own technology. So just wanted to make those small points. I'm very passionate about there's a moral obligation as well as a financial one, especially in biotech, to the technologies that were taxpayer funded. Australians have to get first use of that technology, which means going here also.
Thank you. Do we have any other advancement? Sorry, yourself.
Yeah, I'm David George. I'm from Ostend, which is an engineering firm. It has about 15 engineers, but then also an in-house fabrication with about 15 tradesmen. And I'm also third generation, so great to see another family business. Hopefully get to 9,000, but yeah, give us a fifth generation. This is a question for John. Are you a bit nervous in relation to having a Chinese production plant owned by a US company in relation to some geopolitical risks? And then if so, have you thought about reshoring that, or is that possible to reshore that in Australia?
I wouldn't say nervous, but I'm very conscious of the challenge, and it's something that we are looking at. And I think one of the things, a lot of people have talked about IP protection. One of the reasons why we complete our product here in Australia is for the IP protection. As we're now doing new products, we want to strengthen that protection, and there is then again an extra incentive to do it in Australia. So yes, those thoughts are very much front of mind, and they'll be rolled out as we introduce new activities, not with respect to what we currently do.
We have time for one more question. Would anyone like to put their hand up and ask? All right, we get an early mark. Can everyone please put their hands together for our amazing panel? I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank the amazing Brent. Thank you.